She spent her last $8,000 on a mansion everyone called cursed. They laughed. They mocked. They said she'd lost her mind. But when she found the compass buried in the garden, when the hollow wall whispered secrets 70 years old, when the stone finally opened and revealed what had been hidden in the darkness, she realized some treasures aren't meant to make you rich. They're meant to show you who you were always meant to become. A single beam of afternoon light cuts through the boarded window like a blade, illuminating thousands of dust motes suspended in the stale air of what was once a grand ballroom. They swirl and dance, disturbed by something moving below. Footsteps. Careful, hesitant, the creak of old floorboards protesting under weight they haven't held in decades. Worn sneakers appear first, laces frayed and stained with dried paint, then jeans with holes at the knees, not the fashionable kind, the kind that come from kneeling on hard floors during long shifts. A woman's hand reaches out, fingers trembling slightly as they push aside a rotted velvet curtain that disintegrates at her touch, releasing a cloud of decay. Claire Hartman stands in the center of the ballroom, barely breathing. The walls rise around her like the ribs of some massive beast. Peeling wallpaper hangs in strips, revealing gold fleur-de-lis patterns beneath decades of water damage. Above her head, a crystal chandelier dangles by a single rusted chain, swaying almost imperceptibly. A cracked mirror the size of a door reflects it all back, the destruction, the faded grandeur, and her own small figure standing in the wreckage. She moves forward slowly, testing each board before trusting it with her full weight. Her hand trails along the wall and stops suddenly. She taps once, twice. Hollow. Her breath catches. The sound echoes differently here, like there's space behind the plaster, something hidden in the bones of this dying house. 3 weeks ago, a crowded auction room, her hand shaking so badly she could barely raise the paddle. $8,500. Everything she had left in the world. The auctioneer's gavel falling like a judge's sentence. Sold to the lady in the back. The memory dissolves. She presses her palm flat against the wall, feeling the coolness of the plaster, feeling something else too, a whisper of air, barely there, like the house is breathing. Mom? Sophie's voice cuts through the silence from somewhere deeper in the mansion. Young, worried. Mom, I found something weird. Claire turns, her hand dropping to her jacket pocket where something small and brass catches the dusty light for just a moment. A compass. Tarnished and old, with initials she doesn't recognize etched into the back. Her fingers close around it like a lifeline. They said I was crazy, she thinks, staring into the shadowed corridor where her daughter's voice came from. A single mother with $8,000 buying a mansion everyone called cursed. The house groans around her, settling, or perhaps waking up. But I wasn't looking for a home. I was looking for a second chance. Her footsteps echo as she moves toward Sophie's voice, toward whatever strangeness her daughter has found in this labyrinth of forgotten rooms. What I found was worth more than I could imagine. The compass grows warm in her hand, and it would cost me everything to keep it. 2 months earlier, Claire Hartman had been a different kind of desperate. She'd stood in the cramped apartment above Murphy's laundromat, staring at the eviction notice taped to her door. 60 days. The landlord was renovating, which really meant raising the rent by $400 a month. $400 she didn't have. Claire was 34 years old, a night shift nurse at St. Michael's Hospital, and a single mother to 9-year-old Sophie. She worked 3 12-hour shifts a week, picked up overtime whenever she could, and still the math never worked. Rent, groceries, Sophie's asthma medication that insurance only half covered. The electric bill that kept climbing. Her ex-husband had left 2 years ago with their savings account and a note that said, "I can't do this anymore." No child support, no forwarding address, just gone. That night, after Sophie fell asleep behind the curtain that separated their bedrooms, Claire had scrolled through rental listings with tears blurring her vision. Everything cost more than she could afford. Everything required first month, last month, security deposit money that existed only in some alternate universe where nurses got paid what they were worth. That's when she saw it. Historic Vandermeer Estate, auction starting at $5,000. Eyes. The photos showed a Victorian mansion from 1887, 3 stories of faded elegance, slowly being devoured by vines and time. 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, 6,000 square feet on 3 acres in Millbrook, Connecticut. The listing was brutally honest. Collapsed ceilings, extensive water damage, sealed rooms, structural assessment required, most likely a teardown. The comments below were worse. That place is cursed. Every owner since the 52nds has lost everything. My uncle tried to flip it in '89. Went bankrupt. Don't touch it. Someone should just burn it down and start over. But Claire saw something different in those photos. She saw thick walls that had survived 130 winters. She saw bones that were still standing when everything around them had fallen. She saw potential. Her mother's voice had been sharp over the phone. Are you insane? You can't afford to fix up a mansion. You can barely afford where you are now. I can't afford to stay here either, Mom. Then come home. Get a normal job. Stop trying to prove something that doesn't need proving. That stung. Claire had spent her whole life proving something that the girl who grew up in a trailer park could make it. That being pregnant at 19 didn't define her forever. That she could raise a daughter alone and still be enough. She'd liquidated everything. Her father's coin collection that was supposed to be Sophie's college fund. The engagement ring she'd kept in a drawer for 2 years, unable to sell it until desperation became bigger than sentiment. A savings bond from Sophie's grandmother. Total, $8,500. At the auction, she'd been the youngest person in the room by 20 years. The only woman sitting alone. The only one not laughing when the auctioneer made jokes about fixing it with duct tape and prayers. Her hand had trembled so badly when she raised the paddle that she thought everyone could see her fear. $8,200. Going once. Going twice. Sold. Walking out, she'd heard the whispers behind her. That poor fool. Give her 6 months before she's begging someone to take it off her hands. Some people just don't know when they're in over their heads. Claire had stopped in the parking lot, keys to a condemned mansion clutched in her shaking hand. For a moment, she'd wanted to run back inside and beg them to undo it. To give her money back. To let her fail quietly instead of spectacularly. Then Sophie had tugged her sleeve. Mom, we really get to live in a castle? Claire had looked down at her daughter's hopeful face, this kid who'd never complained about sleeping behind a curtain, who'd never asked why they ate ramen 3 nights a week, who still believed her mother could do anything. Yeah, baby, she'd whispered. We really do. That had been 3 weeks ago. Now, standing in the decaying ballroom, with dust in her lungs and a hollow wall under her palm, Claire pulled the brass compass from her pocket. She'd found it that first morning, half buried in the overgrown garden, tarnished but still working, with the initials EV engraved on the back. She didn't know who EV was, didn't know why the compass had been left behind. But when everyone told her she was lost, it felt right to carry something that always found north. Sophie appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. Mom, seriously, you need to see this. Claire took a breath. The house groaned around them like something waking from a long sleep. She'd spent everything she had on a mansion everyone called cursed. Now she just had to prove they were wrong. The first morning, Claire and Sophie arrived with everything they owned packed into a borrowed pickup truck. 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of dishes, Sophie's stuffed animals in a garbage bag. The sum total of their lives fit in 6 boxes. The mansion waited. In daylight, it looked even worse than the auction photos. Vines strangled the east wing like grasping fingers. Half the windows on the 3rd floor were shattered, dark eyes staring out at nothing. The wraparound porch sagged in the middle. Boards rotted through in places where rain had pooled for decades. But the front door, massive oak with stained glass panels showing a ship at sea that was still beautiful. The glass was cracked, spiderwebbing across the ship's sails, but the colors caught the morning light and threw blue and amber patterns across the entry hall floor. "It's like a church," Sophie whispered, stepping inside. The echo was the first thing Claire noticed. Every sound repeated itself: footsteps, breathing, the creak of floorboards settling. The house was listening. They set up camp in what must have been the library. It was the only room on the 1st floor with an intact ceiling-coffered wood panels that had somehow survived when everything else leaked. Built-in bookshelves lined 3 walls, empty except for dust and the occasional forgotten volume. A stone fireplace dominated the 4th wall, its mantel carved with flowers and vines. Sophie claimed the window seat, brushing away cobwebs to reveal a cushion that disintegrated at her touch. "Can this be my reading spot?" "If the window doesn't fall out," Claire said, but she was smiling. That first week was a war against decay. Claire worked during her days off, sleeping only when exhaustion forced her to. She patched the worst roof leaks with tarps and prayer, cleared decades of leaves from the gutters, tested every faucet until she found 3 that still worked. The house revealed itself slowly, room by room. The dining room still had a table for 16, its surface warped but solid. The kitchen was a nightmare of rusted appliances and cabinets hanging off their hinges. Upstairs, 12 bedrooms opened off a central hallway like secrets waiting to be told. In one bedroom small, painted a faded yellow, Claire found traces of a child. A height chart penciled on the doorframe, measurements from 1,947 to 1,950. Eleanor, age 8 to Eleanor, age 11. Claire ran her fingers over the marks. Someone had lived here, had grown here, had measured their daughter's growth in pencil on a doorframe, never imagining the house would outlive them all. Sophie appeared beside her. "Who's Eleanor?" "I don't know, baby." But the name stuck in her mind like a splinter. Day 4 brought the first contractor. He was 40 minutes late and looked at the mansion the way you'd look at a dying animal, pity mixed with disgust. "Lady," he said, not even bothering to go inside. "This place needs 300 grand, minimum. And that's if we don't find mold, asbestos, or structural damage, which we will." Claire's stomach dropped. "I just need the basics: running water, electricity, safe floors." He laughed. Actually laughed. "You got 8 grand for that?" "I have..." She did the math in her head. After buying supplies, she had maybe $300 left. "I can pay in installments." His expression shifted from amusement to something colder. "I don't work on lost causes, and I don't finance pipe dreams for single mothers who don't know when they're beaten." He left. His truck kicked up gravel as he sped away. Claire stood on the sagging porch, hands shaking. Behind her, the house creaked. The second contractor never showed up. The third took one look at the east wing where the floor had partially collapsed into the basement and shook his head. "You need to condemn this, not renovate it." At Sophie's new school, the mockery was quieter but sharper. Claire picked her daughter up on day 3 and found her sitting alone on a bench, eyes red. "What happened?" "Nothing." "Sophie." Her daughter's voice was small. "They said we live in the haunted house, that everyone who lives there dies, that I'm going to die too." Claire's heart cracked. She knelt down, eye level with her daughter. Hey, look at me. This house isn't haunted. It's just old and tired, like a grandma who needs help getting around. Then why does everyone say it's cursed? Because people fear what they don't understand, Claire wanted to say. Because it's easier to call something cursed than to admit it just needs care. Because they don't see what we see, she said instead. That night, her mother called. I heard you couldn't find a contractor. News traveled fast in small towns. I'll figure it out. Claire. Her mother's voice was tired. You can still come home. Admit this was a mistake. There's no shame in... Yes, there is. Claire surprised herself with the sharpness in her voice. There's shame in giving up, in letting everyone be right about me. This isn't about pride. Yes, it is. It's about showing Sophie that when the world tells you you're nothing, you don't believe them. She hung up, sat in the empty library, cried where Sophie couldn't hear. But morning came, and with it, determination. If contractors wouldn't help her, she'd learn to help herself. YouTube became her teacher. How to replace a broken pipe, how to patch drywall, how to test electrical wiring without killing yourself. The work was brutal. Her hands blistered, then calloused. Her back ached from crawling through crawl spaces. But slowly, painfully slowly, the house responded. She got water running to the kitchen and one bathroom, rigged up electricity to 3 rooms, using extension cords and a single functioning circuit breaker. Cleared enough debris from the dining room to set up their donated air mattresses. And she started noticing things. The floor plan didn't make sense. She'd walk from the ballroom to the library and count her steps 42. Then she'd go outside and measure the distance. Should have been 55 steps. Where did those 13 feet go? Walls that sounded hollow when she tapped them. Not the normal hollow of plaster over studs, but empty. Like there was a room behind them that shouldn't exist. In the basement, a stone-walled space she'd avoided because it flooded every time it rained, she found something odd. A door, bricked up from the inside. You could still see the outline, the frame painted over but visible if you knew where to look. Why brick up a door from inside? Unless you were sealing something in, or keeping something out. Sophie found the portrait on day 9. It was in one of the upstairs bedrooms, covered with a dust sheet that Sophie had pulled away. A woman, maybe 40, painted in the style of the 1940 seconds. She wore a navy dress and pearls. Her hair was dark, pulled back in an elegant roll. But it was her eyes that caught Claire. They were knowing, sad, like she'd seen the future and accepted it. At the bottom of the frame, a small brass plaque, Eleanor Vandermeer, 1949. That's the name from the doorframe, Sophie said. Claire stared at the portrait. Eleanor stared back. There was something in the woman's painted hand, partially hidden by her skirt. Small, circular. Claire leaned closer. A compass. She pulled the brass compass from her pocket, the one she'd found in the garden, tarnished and old. In the portrait, Eleanor's compass gleamed. Mom? Sophie's voice was uncertain. Why would someone leave a painting behind? I don't know. But standing there, looking into Eleanor Vandermeer's painted eyes, Claire felt something shift. This wasn't just an abandoned house. This was a house someone had left on purpose. Someone who'd hidden things carefully. Someone who'd expected, maybe hoped that the right person would eventually find them. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the missing 13 feet between rooms, the bricked-up door, Eleanor's knowing eyes. She got up quietly, so as not to wake Sophie, and walked through the dark house with only her flashlight. The beam caught on peeling wallpaper, cracked plaster, the ghostly shapes of furniture under sheets. In the ballroom, she stopped at the wall that had sounded hollow, tapped it again. The echo was definitely wrong. She pressed her ear against it, listening. And from somewhere deep in the walls, maybe real, maybe imagined, she heard something. A whisper of air moving through hidden spaces. The house was breathing. And it was keeping secrets. Claire started dreaming about the house. Not nightmares exactly, but strange, vivid dreams where she walked through rooms that didn't exist. Hallways that led to doors she'd never seen. And always, Eleanor Vandermeer stood at the end of them, holding that compass, watching with those knowing eyes. She'd wake up with her heart pounding, the brass compass clutched in her hand, though she didn't remember reaching for it. Week 4 began with rain. It hammered the mansion for 3 straight days, finding every weakness in the roof Claire hadn't patched yet. She and Sophie raced through the house with buckets, emptying them as fast as they filled. The sound was maddening, drip, 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 echoing through empty rooms like a clock counting down. On the second night, the basement flooded. Claire went down with her flashlight to assess the damage and found herself standing in 3 inches of water. The stone walls wept with moisture. The bricked-up door she'd noticed before was now clearly visible, water streaming down its surface in dark rivulets. She waded closer, playing her light across the old bricks. They'd been mortared decades ago. That much was obvious. But there was something carved into the frame above, almost invisible beneath layers of paint and grime. She scraped at it with her fingernail until letters emerged. NEC Spes NEC Metis. Latin. She photographed it with her phone and looked it up later. Neither hope nor fear. What kind of message was that to carve above a door you were sealing forever? The next morning, Sophie got sick. Not badly, just a cold from the damp and drafty rooms, but enough to keep her home from school. Claire called in sick to work, losing a shift she desperately needed, and spent the day making soup on their hot plate while Sophie slept in the library. She used the time to search. The attic was her destination. She'd avoided it because the stairs were treacherous and the space seemed endless. But if there were answers about Eleanor Vandermeer and why she'd left this house, they'd be up there. Dust coated everything like snow. Boxes lined the walls, most of them water-damaged and falling apart. Claire opened them carefully, finding the expected detritus of lives lived and abandoned. Moth-eaten clothes, rusted tools, magazines from the 1,940 seconds. Then she found the trunk. It was pushed into a corner, half hidden under a collapsed stack of furniture. Heavy, locked with a brass padlock that had rusted shut. Claire used a crowbar to break it open. Inside, documents, hundreds of them, carefully wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from moisture. Shipping manifests from Vandermeer Shipping Company, dated 1920 through 1951. Legal papers, contracts, and beneath all of that, journals. 5 leather-bound journals, each one marked with Eleanor's name and a year. Claire's hands shook as she opened the first one, dated 1947. Father says the company is finished. The war changed everything, shipping routes, regulations, competition from companies that don't care about their workers. He wants to sell. But these ships, they've been our family's livelihood for 70 years. How do you just walk away from that? She flipped ahead, reading entries at random. 1948. I've started working with the Women's Security Initiative. They're collecting assets from women who can't legally control their own finances, husbands who gamble, sons who squander. These women are giving us their jewelry, their inheritances, anything of value to hide until laws change, until women have rights to their own property. We're creating a trust, but it has to be secret. The government would seize it. Family members would fight for it. So we're building something that can't be found unless you know exactly where to look. Claire's heart began to race. 1,949. The collection is larger than I imagined. We've received donations from 43 families. Some of the pieces are extraordinary jewelry that's been passed down for generations, now being hidden to protect it from men who would sell it or lose it. We're creating documentation for everything, sealed records that will prove ownership when the time comes. But where to hide it? The company building isn't safe. Banks can be audited. It needs to be somewhere permanent. Somewhere only the right person would think to look. Claire read faster, pulse hammering in her ears. 1,950. Father agreed to let me renovate the East Wing. He thinks I'm creating a modern sitting room. He doesn't know I'm building something else entirely. The architect I hired is discreet. He understands what we're doing and why. The space will be hidden behind the fountain room, accessible only through a passage that requires both knowledge and courage to find. The stones themselves will protect what we're hiding, not just from thieves, but from time. The fountain room, the basement, where water damage was worst. 1,951. It's finished. $47 million in jewelry, safely hidden where no one will find it until women have the legal right to claim it. I've created a trust document, but I'm not filing it anywhere official. Instead, I'm leaving clues, breadcrumbs for someone who needs this house the way these women needed protection. Someone who won't give up just because the path is difficult. Someone who understands that the most valuable things are often hidden in plain sight, protected by everyone else's inability to see what matters. The journal ended there. Claire sat back, barely breathing. $47 million in 1951 dollars. She did quick mental math accounting for inflation, appreciation of precious stones and metals over 7 decades. The collection could be worth over $100 million today. And it was hidden somewhere in this house. She scrambled through the remaining journals, finding more details. Architectural sketches showing false walls and hidden passages, lists of donors and their contributions, photographs of jewelry wrapped in cloth and placed in numbered boxes. The final journal, dated 1952, was shorter, the handwriting more hurried. March 15. They know. Someone from the government found out about the collection. They're calling it tax evasion, demanding we turn everything over. But these pieces don't belong to the government, they belong to the women who trusted us to protect them. Father is panicking. He wants to cooperate, to save the company. But I can't. I won't. March 18. We're leaving tonight. Father, Mother, and I. The lawyer has arranged papers, new identities, a fresh start in Argentina. The house will be sealed, officially abandoned. Let them search. They'll find nothing. The collection is protected by more than locks and walls. It's protected by design, by intention, by the simple fact that men like them would never think to look where I've hidden it. If you're reading this, you found the journals. You didn't give up on this house when everyone said you should. That means you're the right person. The compass will guide you. Not the one I'm taking with me. I need that for the journey ahead. But I've left its twin in the garden, buried where roses used to grow. Follow true north. Trust the stones. And remember, what we're protecting isn't wealth. It's the future of women who have nothing. Claire's vision blurred with tears. She grabbed the journals and raced downstairs to the library, where Sophie was awake now, reading a book by the window. Mom, you look weird. Baby, I found something. Something important. She spread the journals across the floor, showing Sophie the sketches and lists. Her daughter's eyes went wide. Is that treasure? Sort of. It's jewelry that belonged to women a long time ago. Women who couldn't protect it themselves, so Eleanor hid it for them. In our house? In our house. Sophie picked up one of the sketches, a detailed cross-section of the East Wing, showing the fountain room and a passage leading down into darkness. Can we find it? Claire looked at Eleanor's portrait hanging on the wall, those knowing eyes seeming to say, "I've been waiting for you." "Yeah," she whispered. "I think we can." That night, after Sophie fell asleep, Claire stood in the ballroom where she'd first heard the hollow echo in the walls. She pulled out the compass, watching its needle settle north. Toward the East Wing. Toward the fountain room. Toward $100 million in hidden jewelry. She thought about the women who'd trusted Eleanor, about the mockery she'd faced for buying this mansion, about every contractor who'd laughed at her, every neighbor who'd called her foolish, every relative who'd said she was in over her head. They had no idea. None of them knew that this worthless mansion was actually a fortress, a vault, a promise kept for 70 years. And tomorrow, she'd start fulfilling it. But first, she needed to understand exactly what she was walking into. Because the last journal entry had included one more note, written in Eleanor's hurried hand. The passage to the collection is dangerous by design. Structural weaknesses built deliberately to discourage searchers. Only someone who truly needs what's hidden, who won't be deterred by risk, will make it through. I'm sorry for that. But some treasures are worth any risk to protect. Claire looked toward the East Wing, where the floor had partially collapsed, where everyone had told her never to go, where Eleanor had built a fortress disguised as decay. The compass grew warm in her hand. Tomorrow, she'd find out if she was brave enough to claim what Eleanor had left behind, or if the mansion's secrets would remain buried for another 70 years. Claire descended into the basement at dawn, when Sophie was still sleeping and the house was quiet enough to hear her own heartbeat. The fountain room waited in the flooded darkness. She'd spent the previous evening studying Eleanor's architectural sketches, memorizing every line. The passage was supposed to be hidden beneath the fountain itself, a marble structure that had dominated the basement's center for over a century. According to the drawings, pressing a specific sequence of carved roses on the fountain's base would trigger a mechanism, revealing stairs that led down into the hidden vault. Simple, elegant, brilliant. Except the fountain was destroyed. Claire stood knee-deep in stagnant water, her flashlight beam playing across what remained of Eleanor's masterpiece. The marble had cracked down the center, probably decades ago. One entire side had collapsed into rubble. Vines had grown through the cracks, their roots prying the stones apart year after year until the structure was barely recognizable. The carved roses Eleanor had mentioned? If they'd ever existed, they were buried under moss and broken stone. Claire's hands shook as she waded closer, searching desperately for anything that matched the sketches. She ran her fingers over every surface, pressing, pulling, looking for the trigger mechanism. Nothing. No, 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 she whispered. It has to be here. She worked for 2 hours, ignoring the cold water seeping through her jeans, ignoring the ache in her back. She moved chunks of marble, scraped away moss, traced every crack and crevice. The fountain was dead. Whatever mechanism Eleanor had built into it had been destroyed by time and water and neglect. The vault, if it even existed, was sealed forever. Claire climbed out of the basement as the sun rose, her clothes soaked, her hope shattered. She sat on the library floor beside Sophie's sleeping form and cried silently, shoulders shaking. She'd been so sure. The journals had been so specific. But 70 years of decay had erased Eleanor's carefully laid plans. The compass sat on the floor beside her, its brass surface dull in the morning light. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. The needle spun lazily, settling north toward nothing. Stupid, she whispered. I was so stupid. The next blow came that afternoon. A black Mercedes pulled up the gravel drive. expensive and out of place. A man emerged 50-something, silver hair, suit that probably cost more than Claire's car. "Miss Hartman?" He extended his hand as she met him on the porch. "Marcus Bellamy. I represent a development company interested in historic properties." Claire didn't take his hand. "The house isn't for sale." His smile didn't waver. "I understand you've invested considerable time and resources into the property. But let's be realistic, you're a single mother, working a nurse's salary. The renovations this place needs are beyond your means. You don't know what I can do. I know you've been turned down by every contractor in 3 counties." His smile sharpened. "I know your daughter is being bullied at school. I know you're one emergency away from financial collapse." Claire's stomach dropped. He'd been asking about her, researching her. "I'm prepared to offer you $75,000, cash. Today, you walk away with a profit and no more stress." "No." "Miss Hartman." "I said no." His expression cooled. "This property has been a burden to everyone who's owned it. My father bought it in 1989, spent a fortune trying to restore it, and lost everything. You're making the same mistake he did." Something clicked in Claire's mind. "Your father owned this house?" "For 3 years, until it bankrupted him." Bellamy's eyes were hard now. He spent those 3 years searching for something he'd heard rumors about. A collection, hidden wealth. He tore apart half the east wing looking for it. Claire forced her expression to remain neutral. Did he find it? Of course not, because it doesn't exist. It's a fairy tale people tell themselves to justify throwing their lives away on this money pit. He pulled out a business card. 75,000. The offer expires in 1 week. After he left, Claire stood on the porch, shaking. Bellamy knew about the collection, or at least suspected. If she kept searching, if she made any progress, he'd notice. He was watching. That night brought the 3rd disaster. Claire was at work a shift she couldn't afford to miss when her phone rang. Sophie's school. "Miss Hartman, there's been an incident." Her daughter had collapsed during gym class. Asthma attack, severe. The mold and dampness in the mansion had been making it worse, the school nurse explained gently. Sophie needed to see a specialist. Needed different medications. Needed to live somewhere that wasn't slowly poisoning her lungs. Claire picked her up early, drove home in silence while Sophie wheezed in the passenger seat. The ER bill arrived 2 days later, $2,400. Her bank account had $183. She sat at the dining room table that night, surrounded by bills she couldn't pay, staring at the architectural sketches that had led her to a dead end. The property tax notice had come to $4,200 due in 30 days. Her car was making that grinding noise again. The roof had new leaks she couldn't reach. And Sophie needed to breathe. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "There's no shame in admitting you were wrong." Maybe there wasn't. Maybe the shame was in being too stubborn to protect her own daughter. Claire pulled out Bellamy's business card. 75,000 would solve everything. Pay the bills. Get Sophie proper medical care. Find them a small, safe apartment somewhere dry and warm. It wasn't giving up. It was being practical. She reached for her phone. Stopped. Looked at Eleanor's portrait hanging on the wall. Those knowing eyes seemed to ask, "Are you really going to let them win? After everything?" Claire's hand dropped to the compass in her pocket. She pulled it out, studying it in the lamplight. The brass was tarnished, the glass face scratched. But the needle still worked, still pointed faithfully north. Eleanor's words echoed from the journal. "The compass will guide you. Follow true north. Trust the stones." She'd followed the compass to the fountain room. But the fountain was destroyed. The stones were broken. Unless... Claire stood suddenly, her chair scraping back. Trust the stones. Not the fountain, the stones themselves. She grabbed the architectural sketches, spreading them across the table. The fountain room was built from stone massive blocks that had been there since the mansion's construction. The fountain itself was marble, but the room's walls and floor were something else, something permanent. Eleanor's journal had said, "The stones themselves will protect what we're hiding." What if the fountain had never been the entrance? What if it was just misdirection, a decoy for searchers like Bellamy's father who would tear apart the obvious targets? What if the real entrance was in the stones themselves? Claire looked at the clock. 2 a.m. Sophie was asleep upstairs. The house was silent, except for the usual creaks and settling. She grabbed her flashlight and headed for the basement. The water had receded somewhat, only ankle-deep now. Claire waded to the fountain room, but this time she ignored the destroyed marble structure. Instead, she examined the walls. Stone blocks, fitted together with precision, each one carved from what looked like granite, massive and seemingly permanent. She ran her hands along them, searching for anything unusual. There in the northeast corner, exactly where the compass pointed when she held it steady, a block that was slightly different from the others. The same color, the same size, but the surface was smoother, and carved into its face, almost invisible unless you knew to look, a compass rose. Claire's breath caught. She pressed it. Nothing. Pulled it. Nothing. Then she remembered Eleanor's compass in the portrait, how she'd held it. Not just carried it, but used it. Claire placed her brass compass directly against the carved rose, aligning them. And twisted. The stone block shifted with a grinding sound that echoed through the basement. It rotated inward, revealing darkness beyond. A passage, hidden for 70 years behind a single stone block that looked like all the others. So simple that everyone had missed it. So elegant that only someone with the compass would ever think to try. Claire's hands shook as she shined her light into the opening. Stone steps led down into absolute darkness. The air that rushed out was different, dry, cool, controlled, like it had been preserved. Like something down there was being protected. She heard Sophie's voice from upstairs, calling sleepily, "Mom?" Claire pulled back from the passage, her heart hammering. She'd found it. After everything, the mockery, the failures, the nearly giving up, she'd actually found Eleanor's hidden entrance. But the steps led down into darkness that had been sealed for 70 years. Into a passage Eleanor had warned was dangerous by design. Into a space that might hold $100 million in jewelry or might hold nothing but dust and broken promises. And she had a sick daughter upstairs who needed her. Claire looked at the compass in her hand. The needle pointed steadily into the darkness, toward whatever Eleanor had left behind. Tomorrow, she'd have to decide. Take Bellamy's money and walk away, or descend into the unknown and risk everything on a 70-year-old promise. But tonight, she carefully pushed the stone block back into place, sealing the passage again. Some decisions needed daylight, and some needed courage she wasn't sure she had anymore. Claire waited until Sophie left for school the next morning before returning to the basement. She'd barely slept. All night, the passage had called to her that dark opening behind the stone, the preserved air, the promise of something hidden for 70 years. But she'd also held Sophie close, listening to her daughter's labored breathing, feeling the weight of responsibility that came with being someone's entire world. Now, standing in the ankle-deep water of the fountain room, Claire placed the compass against the carved stone rose and twisted. The grinding of ancient mechanisms echoed through the basement. The stone block rotated inward, revealing the passage. She'd brought better equipment this time. A powerful LED flashlight, her phone fully charged, a bottle of water. She'd also left a note on the kitchen table, just in case. Gone to the basement. If I'm not back in 2 hours, call 911. I love you. Mom. The steps descended steeply, carved from the same granite as the walls. Claire counted them as she went down. 20, 30, 40. The air grew cooler, drier. She was going deep beneath the mansion's foundation, into a space that had been sealed since 1951. At the bottom, another door. Iron, heavy, with a combination lock that looked far too modern for its age. But beside the lock, carved into the iron itself, a compass rose, and beneath it, 4 words: neither hope nor fear, true north. Claire's hands shook as she aligned her compass with the carved rose. The lock clicked. The door swung inward. What lay beyond made her breath stop. The vault was small, maybe 15 feet square, but every surface gleamed. Climate control units hummed quietly in the corners, powered by some independent system that had run for 7 decades. LED lights flickered on automatically as she entered, responding to motion sensors that shouldn't have existed in 1951 but somehow did. Eleanor Vandermeer had built something that was decades ahead of its time. Metal shelving lined 3 walls, and on them sat boxes, dozens of them, each one labeled with a number and a name written in Eleanor's careful script. Claire approached the nearest shelf with trembling steps. Box Hashone, Morrison family. Donated 1,948. Diamond bracelet wedding gift from grandmother, hidden from gambling husband. She opened it carefully. Inside, wrapped in acid-free cloth, lay a diamond bracelet that caught the light and threw rainbows across the stone walls. Box #2, Chen family. Donated 1,949. Jade necklace, family heirloom, protected from son who would have sold it for debts. Box #3, Rodriguez family. Donated 1,950. Emerald earrings inheritance, hidden from abusive spouse. Claire moved from box to box, reading the labels, understanding slowly building. This wasn't just a collection of jewelry, it was a record of desperation. Of women who had nothing but these precious things, who couldn't legally control their own money or property, who'd trusted Eleanor to protect what little they had left. 43 boxes, 43 families, 43 women who'd hidden their treasures from the men who would have taken them. In the center of the room sat a desk, and on it, a leather folder marked, "For the Finder." Claire opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a letter, written in Eleanor's hand, dated March 1952. "If you've found this room, you're the person I've been waiting for. You didn't give up when everyone mocked you. You didn't sell when someone offered you money. You didn't run when the path was difficult. That means you understand what these boxes represent: survival, protection, the fierce determination of women who refuse to let their value be stripped away." I was born in 1936. I grew up watching my mother beg my father for money to buy groceries, while he spent his paycheck on whiskey and card games. I watched my aunt lose her inheritance to a husband who gambled it away in a single weekend. I watched countless women trapped in marriages or families that saw them as property, not people. In 1947, I inherited this mansion and a failing shipping company. I had a choice: marry well and let a husband manage everything, or find another way. I chose another way. The Women's Security Initiative started quietly. Word spread among women who understood what it meant to be powerless. They brought me their jewelry, their silver, anything of value they could hide from the men who would take it. Not all men, but enough. The ones who gambled, who drank, who hit. Who believed that marriage gave them ownership over everything, including dignity. We created this vault because women couldn't legally own property in many states, because banks required a husband's signature, because the law said we were children who needed protection, not people who deserved rights. By 1951, We'd collected $47 million worth of jewelry, each piece documented, each family recorded, all of it waiting for a future where women could claim it without fear. Then the government found out. They called it tax evasion, called us criminals, threatened to seize everything and scatter it to collections where these families would never see it again. So we disappeared. My parents and I fled to Argentina with new names, new lives. I left the compass in the garden buried where roses grew, where someone who was paying attention might find it. I left clues throughout the house for someone who wouldn't give up easily. I've been living in Buenos Aires for 70 years now. I'm 91 as I write this, and I've spent every day wondering if anyone would ever find what I hid. Wondering if my life's work would rot behind stone walls, forgotten and useless. But you found it, which means you're someone who sees value where others see worthlessness. Someone who keeps going when everyone says stop. Someone who probably knows what it's like to be dismissed, overlooked, told you're not enough. The jewelry is worth over $100 million now, maybe more. It belongs to the descendants of the families listed in the ledger I've included. But returning it will be complicated. Some families have scattered. Some may not believe their grandmothers gave their treasures to a stranger. You'll need lawyers, documentation, patience. Or you could keep it, sell it quietly, disappear with the money and build a new life. I wouldn't blame you. God knows you've earned it just by getting this far. But I hope you won't. I hope you'll understand that these boxes represent something bigger than wealth. They represent women saying, I matter, my dignity matters, my legacy matters, and I will protect it, even if I have to hide it for 70 years. Do what I couldn't. Give these treasures back to the families who trusted me. Use them to prove that women who were told they were nothing actually built something that outlasted everyone who dismissed them. And if you need money to survive while you do this work, take one piece, just one, enough to keep fighting, because the world will mock you for trying. They'll say you're wasting your time, that you should just sell everything and profit. Don't listen. Some legacies are worth more than money. With hope and gratitude, Eleanor Vandermeer. P.S. The compass was my grandmother's. She carried it through immigration from Ireland, used it to navigate to a new life. She told me it didn't just point north, it pointed toward the person you were meant to become. I hope it guided you here. I hope it guides you forward. Claire sat down hard on the stone floor, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't rich, not in the way she'd imagined. She was a guardian, a keeper of other women's desperate hope. Eleanor hadn't left her a fortune, she'd left her a responsibility. The jewelry glittered on the shelves around her. $100 million worth of emeralds, diamonds, rubies, and pearls. Each piece a woman's last defense against powerlessness. And Claire understood, suddenly, why Eleanor had made the passage dangerous, why she'd hidden the entrance so carefully, why she'd waited 70 years for the right person. Because anyone motivated by greed would have given up, would have sold to Bellamy, would have taken the easy money and walked away. But someone motivated by survival, someone who understood what it meant to protect your daughter with nothing but determination, that person would never stop looking. Claire pulled out her phone and photographed the letter, the boxes, the labels, evidence, documentation, proof. Then she carefully selected one box, the smallest, box #27, Thompson family. Donated $1,950. Pearl necklace saved from estate sale by dying mother. The ledger showed no living descendants. The Thompson line had ended in 1973. Claire opened the box. The pearls glowed in the LED light, perfect and patient. Enough to pay Sophie's medical bills. Enough to keep the mansion until she could figure out what came next. Enough to keep fighting. She tucked the box under her arm and stood, looking around the vault one last time. 42 boxes remained. 42 families waiting to be found. 42 women's legacies waiting to come home. Claire pulled the compass from her pocket, watching its needle settle north. Not toward the treasure, toward purpose. "Okay, Eleanor," she whispered. "I'll finish what you started." The vault hummed around her, patient as stone, full of secrets that were finally ready to be told. Claire emerged from the basement as the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, the Thompson pearls tucked safely in her jacket pocket. Sophie was at her friend's house for a play date, the first one she'd been invited to since they'd moved to Millbrook. Maybe the other mothers were finally realizing the haunted house girl was just a kid who needed friends. Claire stood in the overgrown garden where she'd first found the compass 5 weeks ago and called the number on Marcus Bellamy's business card. He answered on the second ring. "Miss Hartman, I'm glad you've come to your senses." "I'm not selling," she said calmly. "I'm calling to tell you that your father was right. There was something hidden in this house, and I found it." Silence on the other end. "But it's not what you think," she continued. "It's not treasure someone can claim or profit from. It's a collection that belongs to 42 families who trusted a woman named Eleanor Vandermeer to protect it. And I'm going to spend the next few years making sure it gets back to them." "You're making a mistake," Bellamy said, his voice tight. "Whatever you found, it'll tie you up in legal battles for years. The government will claim it. Those families will fight over it. You'll end up with nothing." "Maybe," Claire said. "But at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror." She hung up before he could respond. That evening, she contacted a lawyer who specialized in estate repatriation, a woman named Grace Chen, who'd built her career returning stolen art and contested inheritances to their rightful owners. Grace drove up from New York the next day, spent 3 hours in the vault documenting everything, and emerged with tears in her eyes. "This is extraordinary," she said. "Do you understand what you've found? This is living history. Proof of how women survived when the law gave them nothing." "Can we return it?" Claire asked. "To the families?" "It'll take time. Years, probably. We'll need to track descendants, verify claims, navigate probate law." Grace paused. "But yes, we can do this. And you'll be protecting something far more valuable than jewelry. You'll be telling these women's stories." Claire sold the Thompson pearls through a discreet estate dealer Grace recommended. They brought $127,000, enough to pay Sophie's medical bills, catch up on property taxes, and begin proper restoration of the mansion. Not luxury money, survival money. Exactly what those pearls had been saved for 70 years ago. The story broke carefully, through Grace's contacts in the legal and historical preservation communities. The media came, of course. Single mother discovers $100, million collection hidden to protect women's rights. But Claire kept the focus where it belonged, on Eleanor, on the 42 women who'd trusted her, on the families waiting to reclaim their legacies. The town's mockery transformed into something quieter. Respect, maybe, or shame. The hardware store owner who'd told her to save her receipts stopped her in the parking lot. "I heard what you're doing. Returning all that jewelry instead of keeping it. That takes character." Claire just nodded. She didn't need his validation anymore. The mothers at Sophie's school, the ones who'd whispered about the death trap and pulled their daughters away, started inviting Sophie to birthday parties. Started asking Claire if she needed help with the restoration. She accepted some offers, declined others. She was learning to recognize genuine kindness from guilt-driven gestures. 3 months after finding the vault, Claire stood in what would become the mansion's library, Eleanor's portrait hanging above a restored fireplace, the compass displayed in a glass case beside it. The first family had been located, the Morrison descendants, living in Oregon. Their grandmother's diamond bracelet was being returned next week in a ceremony Grace had arranged. A granddaughter would be there, a woman in her 70s who'd grown up hearing stories about a bracelet that vanished mysteriously, and a grandmother who'd hidden it to keep it safe. 41 families still to find. 41 stories still to tell. Sophie came running in from the garden, where volunteers had been clearing decades of overgrowth. "Mom, come see. They found Eleanor's rose garden." Claire followed her daughter outside to where a team of historical preservation volunteers had uncovered stone borders and pathways hidden beneath vines. And there, in the northeast corner where Claire had found the compass, they'd discovered rose bushes, old, gnarled, but alive, still blooming after 70 years of neglect. "They're survivors," one volunteer said, smiling. "Just like this house. Just like us," Claire thought. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Claire returned to the vault one last time before it would be sealed and secured by historical preservation experts. She stood among the remaining boxes, reading the labels in the LED light. 42 women's desperate hope, protected by stone and time and one woman's fierce determination. She thought about the Claire who'd stood at that auction 5 months ago, hand trembling as she bid her last dollars on a mansion everyone called cursed. That woman had been looking for shelter, for a second chance, for proof that she wasn't the failure everyone said she was. She'd found all of that. But she'd also found something bigger: purpose. Eleanor's letter had asked, "Do what I couldn't give these treasures back." Claire would, even if it took years, even if it meant living modestly while guarding millions, even if the world never understood why she'd chosen responsibility over riches. She pulled out her phone and composed an email to the address Grace had found a woman named Eleanor Vasquez, living in Buenos Aires, who'd been born Eleanor Vandermeer 91 years ago. "Dear Eleanor, my name is Claire Hartman. I bought your family's mansion 5 months ago for $8,200. Everyone told me I was crazy. You left me a letter saying you'd been waiting for someone like me. I found your vault. I found your compass. I found your life's work. And I'm going to finish it. Thank you for trusting that someone would come. Thank you for leaving breadcrumbs for the right person to follow. Thank you for showing me that being dismissed and mocked doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means you're doing something that matters. I'll keep you updated on every family we find, every piece we return. Your legacy isn't hidden anymore. It's coming home. With gratitude and determination, Claire." She pressed send, watching the message disappear into the digital void. Outside the mansion, stars emerged in the clearing sky. The same stars Eleanor must have watched 70 years ago, wondering if anyone would ever understand what she'd built. Claire locked the vault, sealed the passage, and climbed back up to the house that was no longer crumbling but transforming. The compass sat in its case, needle pointing steadily north. Not toward treasure. Toward the woman she'd become, 3 years later. Claire Hartman stood on the restored wraparound porch of the Vandermeer estate, watching the sun set over gardens that bloomed again after decades of silence. The mansion had been transformed, not into luxury, but into purpose. The ground floor housed the Women's Legacy Center, a museum documenting Eleanor's work and the stories of the 43 women who'd trusted her. Visitors came from across the country to see the jewelry that had been returned, to read the letters, to understand what survival looked like when the law offered no protection. 28 families had reclaimed their heirlooms so far. 15 more were still being traced, their boxes waiting patiently in the climate-controlled vault that was now a registered historical site. The upper floors had become what Eleanor had always intended: shelter. 6 apartments housed single mothers in crisis, women fleeing abuse, escaping homelessness, rebuilding after loss. They lived there rent-free for up to 2 years while they found their footing, just as Claire once had. Sophie was 12 now, healthy and confident. She volunteered at the center on weekends, giving tours and telling Eleanor's story to school groups. She'd stopped being the haunted house girl years ago. Now she was the girl who lived in the mansion that saved people. In the library, Eleanor's portrait still hung above the fireplace. And beside it, in its glass case, the brass compass pointed steadily north. Claire had received a reply from Eleanor Vasquez 6 months after that first email. The letter had been written in a shaking hand but with fierce clarity. Thank you for finishing what I started. Thank you for being brave enough to see past everyone's mockery. Thank you for understanding that some legacies are worth more than gold. You are exactly who I hoped would find that compass. Eleanor had passed away peacefully last year at 94, knowing her life's work would continue. Claire touched the compass case gently, the way you'd touch something sacred. She'd bought a crumbling mansion for $8,000 because she was desperate and had nowhere else to go. Everyone had laughed. Everyone had said she was throwing her life away on a cursed pile of stones. They'd been wrong about the curse. But they'd been right about one thing. The mansion had changed her life forever. Just not in the way they'd imagined. Sometimes the most mocked decisions become the most meaningful legacies. Sometimes what looks like failure is actually the beginning of something extraordinary. And sometimes, when you're lost and broken and told you're worthless, all you need is a compass and the courage to follow it north. They said I was crazy for buying a mansion everyone called worthless, but I learned something Eleanor knew 70 years ago. True value isn't measured by what others see. It's measured by what you're willing to protect, even when the world tells you to walk away. What would you have done? If you'd found $100 million hidden in the walls, would you have kept it? Or would you have honored the women who hid it, knowing it might cost you everything? Sometimes the real treasure isn't what's buried in the walls. It's discovering who you become when you choose purpose over profit. And that's worth more than all the jewels in the world.